Welcome to Wilder Wolves Hall of Fame Mode Fandom. My name is Wilder Adams, and this is the first ever Wilder Wolves regular season episode. And today I am joined by the owner of T Wolves Insider on Instagram, a huge Instagram Timberwolves platform, Evan Porter. I've known Evan for years. We've went to Cronkite at Arizona State together. We are kind of the only people, Evan, talking Timberwolves probably in the state of Arizona, man. But you're still down there. It's good to hear from you. How are you doing?
Doing well, man. I mean, yeah, there's not a whole lot of T-Wolves fans out here. Definitely a select few, especially at Cronkite. So always good to be on the show, and weather's finally cooling down here, so feeling good and excited for some basketball here tomorrow.
This is like the only time of the year that I prefer being in Minnesota over Arizona weather-wise, because you
Mhm.
guys, it sounds like it's cooling down, but from my memory, living in Arizona, it's pretty darn hot in October still, and it's beautiful here,
Yeah,
man.
it's still been in the 80s, but it's starting to get to that time where it drops down. So next few months should be nice, especially being able to get outside and then basketball season starting. So my favorite time of year, fall sports and the weather. So
That's true, man. And the one thing, like outside the weather, I think Phoenix Suns fans would take the basketball going on here rather than the Suns right now as well, man. By the way, the Timberwolves play the Phoenix Suns in Phoenix for the in-season tournament next month. So, do you plan on going to
yes,
that?
sir. I plan on going to that for sure. I usually go to the Suns games when Minnesota comes out. I usually try to get to both of them when they come out here. So should be in attendance for sure.
I might be down there, so maybe we'll meet up for that.
Let's
And
do it, man.
heck yeah, man. So today's episode, it's going to be a two-part episode. So number one, we are going to start by, looking into the regular season. Each of us are going to give 5 predictions, anything Timberwolves related for the 25-26 season. And then we're going to close out by previewing the first game of the season out in Portland. Like last year, Minnesota starting in the West Coast area on the road to start the season, and this time in Portland. So Evan, before we really get started, what are your really initial thoughts as we head into this first week of the season?
Yeah, I think it's gonna be an exciting year, not only for Minnesota, but I think just the West. I mean, there's obviously been a lot of changes in the Western Conference over the last few years. I think there's a lot of teams that are continue to get better. Like I look at San Antonio this year, I'm like they could make a huge jump. Dallas kind of retooled their roster. Houston adding Kevin Durant. Phoenix taking a step back, getting younger. There's so many different changes that's going on in the league. Minnesota, looking to probably play more of their younger guys this year. So I'm excited to see how the Western Conference plays out. On the East side, it's always kind of those top 5 teams that are really, really, really solid. I'm looking to see what Orlando does in the Eastern Conference. I think they're kind of my team to watch on that side. But I'm excited, man. I think the West is going to be a big movie. I don't really know how it's going to play out. I can tell you right now, it's up in the air. So I'm excited to get the season started and especially see how the Wolves look to start the year.
And when you look at the Western Conference, if you really think about it, like 13 playoff teams or 13 teams in the Western Conference seem to
Mhm.
be, striving for the postseason this year. And the only teams are like Utah, who aren't realistically looking at the postseason. So it's nuts. And like you said, the major amount of change in the West, when you look at
Mhm.
Dallas, when you look at Denver, OKC is the champion. And then like in a Sunday team like the Spurs, adding De'Aaron Fox because he didn't really play last year in San
Yeah.
Antonio, along with Dylan Harper, man. It's gonna be crazy. And then Minnesota's just sitting here, they're chilling, they're drinking their wine off the beach, and they're saying we made back-to-back conference finals. What changes do we have to make? And now we get
Mhm.
the first data points of proof of concept, whether that is going to work out this season. Minnesota's continuity prioritization this summer going into the year. So let's start right away and we'll give our prediction. So, Evan, can you give me your first Timberwolves related prediction this coming season?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of interesting stuff to choose from, I think. I think my number one is that I've been seeing a ton of stuff about Anthony Edwards and the work he's putting in, his body, the way he's treating it, the way he's ready to go for the season. Uh, My first prediction, I think he's a lock to finish top 3 in the MVP race. I think this is the year that Anthony Edwards really, really, really turns heads. He's gotten better every single year. He's making that jump every single year. I think this is the year where he lands in that top 3. I don't know if he wins it this year yet. Could be a couple more years down the line. But I think this year, I'm going to predict, this is probably more of a hotter take prediction, but I think he's going to finish top 3 in the race. I think he's really locked in. I saw some stuff today about how he really, really, really wants to bring a championship to Minnesota, that he's going to do whatever it takes to get there. And I'm looking at him to literally do everything for this team this year. So that's my number one take. There could be a little biasness if you want to call it in that take, but I think he was in the top 10 last year, and I think he makes another jump this year.
That cracked me up because I literally had that prediction on my list of potential takes for today. Literally,
Yeah.
where is it? My 5th prediction was Anthony Edwards MVP finalist. So,
Okay.
there's only 3 MVP finalists. So I think ours
There
match
you
up
go.
exactly right. And I totally agree. I think, and the other day, Anthony Edwards was actually on John Kay's article. He talked about, his desire. You can tell his ambition
Mhm.
this year it's always been high, but it's taken another
Yeah.
step this year where I think he's really ready to try to cross that threshold this year where it was great. It was cute that this 22, 23-year-old was leading Minnesota this far in the playoffs. And it was
Mhm.
just nice to have that for a couple years. But I think now that he's experienced 2 losses in the Western Conference Finals, I think it's like, okay, put up or shut up. I'm not a kid anymore. This is my 6th season. Luka Doncic made the finals in his 6th season. I think he's ready and ambitious to the point where he wants to be one of the 3 best players in the NBA. And John Kay actually, in his article, Anthony Edwards, talking about his plans to bring a championship to Minnesota, quote, "Don't worry about it. I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to get fly as hell to where they can't stop me." And technically, he's not just referring to this year, he's referring to his entire tenure, but he's talking different this year. He's talking about
Mhm.
championship. Now, he's now just not looking to get into the playoffs like early in his career. He's ready to really push mountains, get to the mountaintop, and really get the job done. That's my takeaway as well. We talked about it during media day. Anthony Edwards was very ambitious, talking about, okay, I want to be not only one of the best players, I want to be the guy. And it sounded intentional about the slight nuances in the game. Of course, in great shape. He was talking about mid-range shots, and he didn't really shoot threes this summer because he's that serious about the mid-range. But he also talked about how he's watching film differently. He's dissecting the game differently. Chris Finch has talked about simplifying his game so that he can become as reliable of a late game player as possible. We're seeing them really say, okay, you're a superstar now. You have arrived. Now, the question is, what's the next step? And it's not skill anymore. It's all about the nuances. It's about mastering basketball. And he's in that stage where he's earned the right to pursue that next step. And I think that intentionality really stands out. And he looks as serious as I've ever seen Anthony Edwards coming in. We've seen the last couple seasons, like he comes in a little out of shape. And that was something he dealt with when he was really young. He's in amazing shape. He looks incredible. He looks in midseason form in October, which is exceptional, especially for Ant, who's a hard worker, but that's something he's been, that's one of his struggles early in his career. So I think everything lines up. I think it's Jokic and Shea, and I think Anthony Edwards is going to be right there because Giannis is probably not going to have the team for it. I don't think Luka Doncic is going to have the team for it. I think Minnesota will be the team for it. So you combine all of that, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, even just seeing the way, like you were kind of mentioning, the way that he's been talking, kind of going over how he's, what he's been doing this offseason, working on, his craft, diverting to the mid range more, watching film. And then you look at kind of the interviews and the reporters, talking to Ant, just saying he seems a lot more serious. I think, the back to back Western Conference finals, at 22 and 23. He's going to be 24 this year, which is still, insanely young, for an NBA superstar. I think that, he's kind of thinking in his mind that, I got to put up or shut up. Like you said, like we've gotten to where we want to be. Now it's, can we get to the next step and win a championship? And can I do whatever it takes, to kind of be in that MVP race to carry my team? So I'm excited to see him this year. I mean, he's, just one of the best personalities in the NBA that the league can have right now. So, happy he's on, the team that I like to cover and, the team I grew up watching. So it's always a show with him. So excited to see him this year for sure.
I love it. And I'll give you that prediction. I'm not going to put that prediction on my side. That was your prediction. And
Yeah.
you nailed that one.
Could be
And
both, man.
Hey, I mean, that's for sure, man. But you know what? The more predictions, the better on the show, right? So
Okay.
my first prediction is I think Minnesota starts the season 15-5 or better. I think Minnesota is going to be a top 2 seed after the first 6 or 7 weeks of the season. And I think that's because continuity is going to be such a big advantage. We're going to see a team like OKC, a young team, who I think will have a slight hangover to start the season because that's the nature. It's a young team after winning a title, that emotional high. You can't even criticize it. It's totally normal. But then you also, Denver is going to figure things out. I think Houston's going to figure things out. I like Minnesota's schedule. It's not like the easiest schedule in the world, but it's not overbearing in my opinion. So when I consider all of that, the first 20 games, how I think Minnesota, they've been talking about it all preseason. We have to start fast. We need to gather wins early. I think they'll be serious about that. And we've seen with the Karl Anthony Towns era on this team with Rudy Gobert, the second year they started 16-4 after having that first season together. And this is the second season in which this team, this iteration has been together. So I think that's going to be a big advantage for Minnesota. And I think they'll start as hot as they did 2 years ago.
Yeah, that's a good take. I think I could really see it happening as well. I think the biggest thing like last year is obviously we did not have a great start to the season. Julius Randle definitely took some time to kind of really lock in and figure out, his fit with the Timberwolves. There was a little weirdness kind of going around with, his fit here and how can he kind of play around with, with the team we had. And, we were losing games. We weren't really in the top of the Western Conference. We were really trying to find, ourselves and, what kind of team we were going to be. And now, having a full year with Randle, we have a healthy roster going in. I think the young guys are really excited. I think there's a lot of energy kind of in the Timberwolves side right now. I think the team's really, really excited for this year. And I think they do want to come out and start hot and kind of show the West that, we made back-to-back Western Conference Finals. We lost Nikhil Alexander-Walker, but we got next guys up. I think, guys like Clark, Shannon, Rob, they're all excited and ready to go. And I think our starting group's ready to go. I think, I really think Donte is going to have a bounce back year. I think everyone's really, really excited for the year. And I think that, people are really not talking about the Timberwolves, that much. There's always like the OKC, Jokic in Denver, other big names out there, the Western Conference, KD. I think Minnesota is always a team that doesn't really get talked about. So I think kind of that, being that hungry team right off the bat and starting, top 3 seed in the West after 20 games it would be a good, really push for the team and, really bring on our identity for the rest of the year. So I like that take for sure.
It's ridiculous to me how this team has made multiple conference finals in a row now.
Mm-hmm.
The only team in the West since 2019 to do that. And every single year, it's always a question whether they'll repeat it again. When their best player is a top 5 player in the NBA, they're saying now. And he's only 24 now. I just find it ridiculous how we're always having this like ESPN picking their 621st simulation and saying they're going to win 43 games and, having Minnesota like easily behind Houston, who hasn't made it out of the first round since like 2 presidential terms. And then you look at, Denver, how many times have we beat them in a row now? 10 times when you count basically
Too many
times. two playoff games. It's 4 regular season games. It's the summer league. It's preseason. I think it's all added up to 10 times in a row now. So,
Yeah,
and they're always indisputably ahead. I think it's ridiculous, frankly.
I agree. Our willingness to be able to play with teams the last few years really shows that, I mean, we can beat anybody.
Mhm.
Obviously we've shown that, and OKC's defense really, really, really kind of took us apart last year. But are we willing? We did blow them out one game. We showed we could beat that team. We showed we could beat anyone else in the West. And again, we have Anthony Edwards, who's Anthony Edwards. And I think that this year, I think we're going to kind of turn some heads during the regular season, kind of heading into the playoffs, because I think people are really kind of underwriting us, after we just made 2 Western Conference Finals. So I'm excited. I do like to take, and I do think the team will start off strong.
Yeah, and I think it's a media thing too. Like, it's really fun to just jump on what's new and what's sexy, what's different. And at the end of the day, like the Spurs or like the Patriots, and I'm not saying the Timberwolves or those teams, but they're
Mhm.
like the epitome of continuity tends to win. And it's not going to get you the most media clicks. Minnesota didn't have a lot of change, but I think it's a big advantage this year, which is why I think they'll start 15-5. And what is your second prediction?
Second prediction is, I think Jaden McDaniels is going to be the second most important player for the Timberwolves this season.
Okay.
The reason I say this is, obviously you can choose Julius Randle or Rudy Gobert being 4-time defense player of the year, but Minnesota, like, they need more guys at times to put the ball in the hoop and to be more aggressive. And I think Jaden really, in the few games I watched of the preseason and just kind of later last year, I think he's in this offseason, I think he's really looking to be aggressive this year. Whether it's taking more threes, using his handle to get to the basket, and just being an aggressive style player and forward with his length. I think it's going to be key for Minnesota. Obviously, we know what he can do on the defensive end. He likes to take on, team's best players defensively. He loves the challenge. He loves it. But I'm looking at his offensive game this year, and I'm really thinking that he's going to make a huge jump. I really think he's going to score quite a bit more per game. And I think he's just going to take way more shots, which I think is a good thing for him. I think he's got tons. I mean, he's got limitless upside, in my opinion. Like, I think if Jaden McDaniels really, really, really put in the work, became an offensive player as well, I mean, he could be one of the better players in the NBA. And I just think he's a really crucial piece for us on the rebounding end, being aggressive when Ant's having an off night, Randall's having an off night, to be kind of that number 3 option offensively, even in the starting lineup. And I think he's going to be the second most important player for the Wolves this year. Doesn't mean he will be, but in a way, like, I think he will be, because we're going to need him to step up big time this year, and I think he's ready for it. I think he has the skill set to do it, and I'm looking for him to be aggressive for this Wolves team all year long.
I think it's a really interesting take that has a lot of validity. I talked about a couple weeks ago that I think there is a world where he could become the second best player on the team this year. So I
Mm-hmm.
completely echo what you're saying. And I think it comes down to his archetype. His archetype is what will bring value, because he can legitimately guard 4 positions. He can defensively, he can lock up your best player. He can roam in the paint. He's shown he can kind of play 2 for 4 on both sides of the floor. And I think that's where his value starts. I think the increased rebounding is where it capitalizes, but I think it really finishes through. Like you said, if Jaden McDaniels becomes a legitimate top 3 scorer on the team, which is actually going to be, I'm going to put my prediction in with yours. I had him as the number 3 scorer on this team this season, because like what you're saying, I think he's going to be a high level scorer. I think they've talked about it. I keep echoing what they're saying at training camp. It's about Jaden being
Mm-hmm.
a confident decision maker with the ball, being intentional with the ball, off the ball, creating his shot, not allowing that to get in the way, and just continuing to build off that. I think they're going to be more intentional. I'm slightly concerned because I didn't feel like the starting five when we saw them in preseason was feeding Jaden enough. So I'm not like super confident in my prediction, but I'm just hoping that his experience and just chemistry and, the pecking order, things will balance out and he will, I think on this team, honestly, like 15 points per game is probably third on in scoring. So can Jaden get to that 15 point per game mark? Can he go back to being an all defensive first team caliber player? And I think if all that adds up, he could become the second most important player on the team.
I personally think it's kind of a what if scenario take, kind of like what we were discussing here. But I do think that Jaden, has the tools to become the second best player on the Minnesota Timberwolves. And that's why I kind of put that take into my list, just because I think if they do distribute him the ball more and they do ask more of him this year, for him to stay healthy and for him to really kick it on the offensive end and the defensive end combined, I think is going to really help the Timberwolves out. And I think that, a team that didn't really make a lot of moves this season, you also have to look at that and you'd be like, okay, well, who's going to step up even more now? And I think it's going to be Jaden McDaniels. So,
yeah, I totally agree. I think this might be the first year where, all the theories about when are they going to really apply his ability. I feel like this could be the year where it's like year 6, it's time to get started. It's time to really start pushing these kids to being leaders and grow men of the team. Because like I said, in regard to Anthony Edwards, they're not kids anymore. This is the first year where it feels like the second wave of their careers really starting. They're no longer just good young players. Now they're just damn good players who are expected to win at the highest level. So that's like the biggest contrast. And, so because I kind of molded my Jaden prediction in with yours, what is your next prediction?
Yeah, no worries. My next prediction is I think it sounds like Mike Conley's going to get the start again this year. They put him in the starting 5 in preseason. It looks like he's going to be the starting point guard. I think he's going to get replaced sometime in this season as in the starting lineup. That's kind of my third prediction. I just don't see Mike Conley being the starting point guard on this team for a full 82 games. I don't know if his body can take it. And one, I don't agree with it. I think Mike Conley is the best guy that you want in as a winner and as a guy who can really make an offense flow and make the smart decisions, not turn the ball over, do the right things. But do I think at his age, can he sustain that for a whole season? And can he play good? He was a great defender in his career, but can he play defense for 82 games and not get blown by younger athletic guards? And I think that's going to maybe be an issue with Minnesota. He saw his percentages drop last year too, especially in the playoffs. I don't know if it's sustainable for the whole season. And I think that's where kind of, there's going to be a conversation. I think, I don't know exactly when in the year. Maybe it's 20 games in, maybe it's 30 games in, maybe it's a deadline thing. But I think there's going to be comments on, that Minnesota starting lineup and should, Donte DiVincenzo fill into that starting role. Maybe Rob plays very well, and maybe Rob starts a couple games this year. Maybe, Terrence Shannon gets a couple starts. I don't know who it's going to be, but I do think there's other options that could fit in a starting lineup if Mike Conley kind of still shows that decline that he did in the playoffs in late last year on both ends of the floor. I think there's going to be a combo during the year for that.
I love how just all of our predictions are somewhat connected at an extreme level.
Yeah.
I think it's fantastic because I totally agree with you. I've said it throughout the offseason, and I don't want to position this as, Mike Conley hate or Mike Conley disrespect.
Absolutely.
I mean, getting Mike Conley at the time Minnesota got him was fantastic. He was legitimately a very good starter when Minnesota made their first conference finals run. And the fact that he was a 6-foot point guard and still that good at that stage is admirable. He is excellent, and there's nothing personal with Mike Conley. That doesn't mean we can't be objective and say we don't trust Mike Conley at a big role. And this isn't baseless. Look at the last 2 playoff series last year. In the conference finals, he averaged 4 points on 21% shooting, and he couldn't get the ball past half court. And in the regular season last year, he shot 38% from two. And we saw the preseason briefly, but he was not active. Not active. He scored like 3 points last game. He did nothing the first game. He hasn't given me any reason to think that he's a trustworthy starter for a team that's serious. And he's the single biggest reason, unfortunately, why this season might not work. If this season doesn't work, it's going to be because they don't have sufficient guard play. They can't get the ball past half court. When they play a team with a ton of perimeter pressure, whether it's Houston or OKC or even Portland, who we're going to see on Wednesday, he's going to have to show that he can still be productive against those teams. And I'm not confident he will. And because, like you're saying, the questions, because Chris Finch clearly values still the idea of somebody organizing the offense with those players like Ant. Because if he didn't, he wouldn't be starting Mike Conley in the first place, because despite how he's played the last year. So I will echo your prediction, and I'll give my prediction complementing that. And I think Minnesota is going to acquire a point guard at the trade deadline this year. I'm not sure who it is. I'm not exactly sure what archetype it is. I'll just throw a name out there because we like throwing names out there. And it's not even a true point guard. I'm not saying it needs to be a true point guard, but I would not be shocked if we hear Malik Monk rumors toward the deadline. I would not be shocked if we heard a more traditional point guard, not a Malik Monk, in the picture. I think they're going to try to get another guard at the deadline who is more reliable in the playoffs. Like, even if Rob Dillingham looks good year two, I don't think they're going to expect him to be productive in the playoffs yet. So I think they'll still be intentional about adding a point guard. And I know this might be too early. Does that mean they package, let's say Dillingham plays good and they don't want to deal Dillingham? Could I see them packaging Donte, Leonard Miller, maybe some draft capital, and trying to get a solid point guard on the team? Would not be shocked. If they really wanted to go ambitious for a really good point guard, maybe they do add Rob Dillingham to the trade package with Donte and get a serious player. I don't know. I'm just throwing ideas out there because, we like to speculate on the show. And that's going to be a theme on the show, by the way, everybody. A lot of speculation. We'll do it consistently. So I don't know what's going to be. I don't know who it's going to be. I have some thoughts, but we'll let those trickle throughout the show, throughout the year. But I think it's very possible that they're going to look for a point guard at the deadline.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it too. I think obviously both of those takes correlate. If Mike Conley's not, living up to, what we're expecting as decline continues, which, we already had a pretty big decline going into the playoffs last year, end of last year. And, I was watching games and seeing, younger athletic guards, blowing by him on the defensive end. His shooting really dropped. Obviously Finch wants him in there because he feels he can correlate an offense. But I think there's going to be some conversations about it. If Rob Dillingham's next up, if there's a trade to be made and they want to add another guard, I think that's something that could definitely be looked into. I think it will be looked into because I do think the guard position is our weak point, especially at the point guard position. That's why there's a lot of combos if we were going to sign somebody in the offseason. So, again, if the point guard position is not working out, there could be some talk there. And I really don't think Mike Conley should be playing more than 10, 15 minutes a game anyway this year. I've said it at the end of this year in the summer. But, it looks like they're trying to ride him again at the beginning of the season. And I disagree. I'm not overly confident in his capability this year. And it's not hate on Mike Conley. I love him. He's one of my favorite players ever. But he's just not the same. So I think, both of those takes correlate well. And I think there'll be some conversations about it during the year.
And I think ideally, hopefully, we will see enough growth from Anthony Edwards, from Donte, from Rob Dillingham, and some of the young players to make Minnesota confident that they don't need a traditional point guard starting, because we've seen with what's happening in Oklahoma City and other places, Houston, etc., you don't necessarily need a traditional point guard anymore in 2025. Ideally, you don't have one. You hope that you have as many threats with the ball in their hands as possible and not somebody who needs to just set the table and get 9 assists to be effective. That's just not the archetype of player that's winning championships anymore. So part of me is hoping like we see enough from the roster that says, you know what, maybe we don't have a traditional point guard we trust, but we've seen enough playmaking from Donte, Shannon, and Rob, and maybe some more from Jaden and Nas, where it's like, okay, you know what, we can make this work. We can kind of like OKC after trading Josh Giddey. Maybe we don't need a point guard that's 2010 traditional Ricky Rubio type. So I think it's going to be super fascinating.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
And let's get into our 4 set of predictions. We've gotten 6 in now, 4 more to go. What's your next prediction?
I think my next one is just I think Donte DiVincenzo is going to have a bounce back season. He's 100. He said he was 110% coming into this season. He definitely had multiple areas during the season last year where he really dipped in his shooting production. He was one of the best shooters in the NBA, before coming to Minnesota. And I think there were spurts for people where, what is going on with Donte? Like what's happening with him? He doesn't look like himself. But one thing I do love about Donte and will always love is when he gets on the court, he is like everywhere. He's one of the most energetic players that we have on our team. His contract's amazing. He's always going to put in 100% effort defensively, getting deflections, getting steals, making plays. And I think he's going to have a bounce back year with his shooting. It did go up towards the end of the year, but I think he's going to have a good year. I think he's going to be a really key shot maker for us. And I think his energy is going to really lift his team up too. And I think that he's a guy that's, should definitely get starter minutes on the team. I'm still a big Donte DiVincenzo believer. I don't think one season really should write him off, or people should think he's, not a key piece for this team anymore. So I think he's going to have a bounce back year. I think his shooting is going to be well. And it's going to be big for us down the stretch.
Yeah, Donte's interesting because I don't think there's enough sample size in either way to really have like full confidence in knowing what he's going to do this year. Like, why did he struggle last year? Did he struggle because the trade and just the natural chaos in your personal life that comes for that? Is he somebody who needs to start to be effective? Because we saw before his breakout season in New York, he was kind of a bench player and he wasn't the most consistent nor efficient player during those time periods. So is Donte somebody who needs to start to be effective? Will Minnesota provide that opportunity? Or is it just, you know what, he needed time to figure it out, and now you'll just get New York Donte regardless of he's starting or on the bench? I'm not sure. That's exactly why I didn't predict anything for Donte, because I don't know what to expect.
A hard prediction.
I hope you're right. I think it's a good prediction. I think ideally on this roster, the way it is, back to the starting point guard combo, even if Donte isn't necessarily a point guard, I think he makes a lot of sense starting next to Ant as well. So regardless of how they get Donte to be effective, I do think that's going to be really important this year. I mean, when you have Rudy Gobert on the team, you can take as many high volume, efficient 3-point shooters as you can, especially those who are competitive on ball defensively. So I think that's what I'll be looking for Donte this year.
For sure.
And my next prediction, and it's another bench player on the team, Terrence Shannon Jr. I'm super excited about him. And I saw more reasons to be excited about him in the preseason because he shot the crap out of the ball. Like, I don't even think he missed a 3 for like 3 games in preseason. He was ridiculous. I think he's going to be top 5 in scoring on the team this year. And I think it's going to probably be 1 Ant, 2 Julius, 3 Jaden, 4 Nas, 5 Terrence Shannon Jr. I think that's what it's going to look like. I can see Shannon even jumping up to 4 on this team. We saw in the preseason, he was in that first rotation in when they were doing their first subs. He was in there. And I think that's a big takeaway from preseason, if you can have any. I think Terrence Shannon is going to get the biggest crack at the Nickeil minutes, the Nickeil opportunity. And I think he ran away with it in the preseason. I thought he looked super good as a shooter, as a decision maker, and as a defender. I thought he brought a lot of competitiveness defensively. So I think he's the second-year player I'm the most excited for this coming season. And I think he's really going to deliver. I think he's going to play over 20 minutes. I think he'll easily score double digits. And I think he's going to be, honestly, right there with Nas as the most effective scoring punch. I really think he's going to have a very good year.
Yeah, I love it. My next take was Terrence Shannon's gonna be the most improved player on the team, so that correlates as well. That was kind of my last one, and I agree 100%. I think he could arguably up there with like Donte in Nas range in scoring. I think at least a 10-point per game guy. I know in the preseason he really shot the lights out of the ball, and that's really exciting. If Terrence Shannon can shoot that good during the season and get downhill like he does and play defense like he does, then wow, he's going to play so many minutes for this team. And he absolutely should. He's a freak athlete. He's a really, really, really ready NBA player. And it only took the whole year for the Minnesota Timberwolves to realize that last year that he was NBA ready, like what we saw in that series versus OKC. So I'm super excited for Shannon. I think he's going to win that most improved kind of spot on the Timberwolves. I'm excited to see what he brings to this team. And I know every time he shows up on the court, it's going to be 110%. He's hungry. He wants to play more, wants to be a value to this team. And he's just a fun watch. Like anytime he's going downhill, he's looking to score the ball, looking to get and ones. He's looking to play defense. He's got length. He's looking to, improve his shot, which it looks like he has. I think he fits really well with, Anthony Edwards, and I think his play style fits Minnesota well. And I think it's time for Finch to really realize that, he's a key piece on this team and he's ready to rock and roll. So excited for T. Shannon. That's my fifth take, kind of correlates with you, but he's probably one of the most, like, if I'm a Timberwolves fan, I'm probably most excited to see Terrence Shannon this year, like out of anybody on the roster, just because you don't know what he's going to bring. You don't know how much he's going to play right away, but I know he's going to improve and become a key piece for the team. So excited stuff for T. Shannon.
100%. I think Finch is realizing that with the opportunity he seemed to have in the preseason. I don't foresee that changing. So
yeah,
I think Shannon will have a very good second year. And that will transition to the final take before we talk about the Portland Trailblazers. And my final take, and I'm not sure if this is super hot. I think it's lukewarm. I think it's like a 6 out of 10 on the hot take, but I think Julius Randle makes the All-Star team this year. I think Randle is going to have a bounce back year in the biggest way. I think he's going to build off of the second half of last year and the playoffs where he was a 21, 7-5 guy. And in the Western Conference, the 12th guy in the All-Star game was Alperen Sengun. And that's usually the type of player who makes an All-Star team. And every year there's always like one or two guys who sub in. So I think Randle is either going to make it straight up or he'll be like the first or second sub. I think Minnesota is going to win enough. I think Julius Randle will be as comfortable he's been since the 2020 Knicks when he really felt loved in New York that first year. He played great. And I think he's very receptive of how people feel about him in the community. And I think his reputation took a big spike in the second half of last year. He has a 3-year extension. He's clearly a part of the team. I think he's settled in. We see it with how he smiles in media day, how he smiles at practice. He's clearly happy to be here. And I think with a player like Randle, that really resonates with his impact. So I think he's going to be really good. I think he makes the All-Star game in that back end. I think he's going to be like a 27-5 guy. And I think Minnesota will win enough games for that to really stand out in the voting or by Adam Silver if it's like the first or second sub after one player is hurt at the All-Star game.
Yeah, I think Randle is definitely going to be settled in more this year. I think, when he first got here, and I think people were like, he wasn't really like smiley. He wasn't really like energetic with the team on the bench. Like he looked a little off. He wasn't really given. It didn't seem like he was giving a lot of effort every night. And then we kind of fast forward to the second half of the year where they really started to kind of mesh with the team. We saw his first two playoff series where he really, really, really played well for this team. And it was exciting. His playoff performances before the OKC series really had me excited of what he could do for this team. He really looked settled in, really kind of took over some of those games. And Julius Randle's a guy who could really take over a game himself. Like we saw it in New York. We've seen some huge performances from him on the Knicks. We've seen some big performances with him on the Wolves. I think he's a guy that's really, really happy to be here now. He knows he's going to be here. He signed an extension. He's ready to go. So I could see an all-star year from him. He's one of those guys that I didn't really want to put in my takes because I don't really know with Randle sometimes. There's some times where, he doesn't play that great. There's times where he plays really well, but can he be consistent like he was towards the end of the year for the Wolves and in the playoffs? Obviously I think he's going to be more settled in now. So I'm confident in him. I think, he's an exciting player. I really want him to be aggressive on the boards this year. And I think it's good take. I think Randle will have a good year for the Wolves. I could see it.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. Like you said, he's somebody who can get swayed, just consistency factor. And that's very true. It's kind of like Cat a couple years ago, where Cat can be kind of swayed through the motions. So they have similarities in that way. But I just think that if Randle is in the positive wave of emotion, I think he has all the positioning from the outside this year to really do that. So it makes me feel good. And now that was fun. We did our 10 predictions for the season. We have many more in the chamber, I'm sure, and we could go and do a 10-hour show if we wanted to. But those were 10 very good ones. And now let's transition and talk about the first game of the season, Evan. The Minnesota Timberwolves playing the Portland Trailblazers. Minnesota currently a 2.5-point favorite in Portland. And let's just start out. I want to hear, what are you thinking about Minnesota this game? What should we look out for? How do you think it's going to go?
I mean, I'm really curious to see how Minnesota comes out energy-wise, for the first game of the NBA season, really looking to set the tone. But I think this game is going to be very competitive. I think Portland is actually one of my favorite teams going into the year. I think there's a lot of exciting stuff with Portland. I look at the roster and the youth that they have, the athletes that they have. I think Donovan Clingan could be a Rudy Gobert type player in better offensively. I think he's a really good defender and could be a defense player of the year kind of player in the future. I look at Shaden Sharp. I look at Scoot Henderson, Danny Avdija, Kamara, the wings, the guards they have, the skills, the young, the youth. They're hungry. They're really good players. I mean, Denny and Kamara are really good wings that you have to look out for. I was really big on Denny coming out of the draft. I actually thought Minnesota was one of my biggest prospects for Minnesota back in the day. His skills have really improved in the NBA. He's kind of an all-around do-it guy now. Kamara is a really good athletic wing. And Shaden Sharp's a really good athletic scorer. Clingan is a good defender. And then the addition of Drew Holiday. You get a veteran, one of the best defenders the league has seen guard-wise. You get him in addition to that young, hungry Portland team. I think he's going to be a huge locker room guy for that team. And I think their starting lineup's really solid. I think these guys are going to take a jump this year. I think Portland could really, really, really I don't know if it's a hot take, but I really think they could maybe contend for a play-in team this year if they stay healthy, if everything goes their way. But I really like Portland. I think it's going to be a competitive game. And I think they're going to look to really outrun the Wolves right away. And I think the Wolves have to expect that with the youth that they have. I think they have to come out strong and play a strong 48 minutes of basketball to go win this game. I don't think it's a handout first game of the year. And, anything can happen the first game of the NBA season, a lot of rust. So I think the Wolves really have to lock in for this one. I'm excited. I'm honestly as excited as I am to see Minnesota. I'm really excited to watch the Portland Trailblazers in this game.
Yeah, I'm with you on the Portland Trailblazers. I think you added everything that's so true about them. Their defensive core is ridiculous. Like it's ridiculous. When you look at Drew Holiday and then you get off of Drew and the Kamara's right there, and then you get into the paint and Donovan Clingan standing in there. Denny Avdia is one of the best defenders nobody talks about in the NBA. Like this is just a very, very physical team. And I could see this team being like a top 5, maybe top 3 defense in the league this year. They have that much size. It just comes down to health with them. And that's a big picture question, but this is the first game of the year. So that's not a question for this game. And I still have PTSD from Minnesota playing Portland last year when they had like those back-to-back games
Yeah.
where Minnesota should have beat them and they just didn't. And it was like peak dysfunction for the team last year. And Portland does it in a way that really gets under this roster skin. Minnesota against 25 teams is bigger, stronger, more physical than you. And then there's a few teams that can really match you. And Portland's one of them.
Yep.
They're even bigger than Minnesota, you could say. They're as, if not more physical. And they're handsy. They get in there and they can force turnovers. They can block shots. And last year's Minnesota team and in the past gets frustrated with teams like this. So even though I believe Minnesota is going to start the season 15-5, I'm pretty scared of this game. I'm much more scared of this game than I
Yeah.
am the Lakers game, which is right after in LA, because
Yeah.
Portland has the personnel that really gets into Minnesota's skin. So I think with Minnesota, what I'm going to watch is how do they respond to the physicality. Portland's going to make it slow and grimy, especially without Scoot Henderson. Are they going to play to Portland's hands with the way Portland wants to play? Or will Minnesota be able to create enough pace like what they want to do to start the year? And if it's slow or if it's not, can Minnesota take care of the basketball? Like to beat a team like Portland, you have to win the possession battle, in my opinion. And how is Minnesota going to compete with them on rebounds? I think that's kind of scary for me. And then can Minnesota take care of the basketball? I think if Minnesota contains those things just enough, keeps it close in those respects, and then it comes down to what you can do late in games. And here's the truth. Minnesota has Anthony Edwards, Portland doesn't. So can Minnesota position themselves late in game where it's close and then they can just let their superior talent figure it out? I think that's what's going to happen or what needs to happen if Minnesota wins this game. I just don't think Minnesota is going to blow this team out of the water. Portland is a solid basketball team, underrated team this year. Maybe not a lot of offense, but they have just enough defense and size, which makes me think they can frustrate Minnesota in Portland, where Minnesota struggles historically anyway. So I'm not confident that Minnesota is going to win this game, sadly. But I think if they win this game, that's going to be a really encouraging sign because it's going to take Minnesota having to face a lot of their own demons to beat a team like Portland because they have the roster personnel that's almost Minnesota's kryptonite.
I agree. I agree with everything you said there. I think they could be a top 5 defensive team, and like I mentioned, like the youth on that team and the hungriness and the havoc that they can cause to teams could be an issue for Minnesota coming out the gate. So we'll kind of see how they respond to that. We'll see how aggressive they get, and can they be that physical team next to them? And can they just, it comes down to who's the better team, and can they be the better team and really kind of outstand what Portland has to bring to that game. So it's definitely a scary one, but I like our chances, but again, it's more of a scary game than some people are going to think who definitely don't understand the Portland Trailblazers and in the young guys that they have. So
the 2.5 point mark sounds right. It's going to be a close game. I really do believe that.
It'll be a close game.
It's going to be a good test for Mike Conley to start the year too, because we're talking about we need a point guard who can get past half court when you're playing ball pressure, when you're playing superior size and physicality. And Portland is like a perfect example of that. So how does Minnesota get the ball up past half court? How do they handle the pressure that Portland's going to put on them? And also another thing I'm going to look for, Minnesota, and this is a big advantage Minnesota has over Portland, they just have much more bench depth offensively. Like when you look at that bench, like they have Jeremy Grant, and that's a really good bench piece. But then after that, there's not a lot of players I'm confident in being a contributor, right? Like obviously, if they had Scoot and Dame right now, that would be a different conversation, but they don't. So I think Minnesota's bench needs to really heavily outplay Portland's bench also to win this game. Can we get 2 of the 3 between Donte, Nas, and Shannon to get 10, 15 plus points? If they can do that, I think Minnesota is also in a favorable spot. So I think Minnesota has to lean into a big advantage. And I think the 2 big advantages, the gap between our best player and their best player, and also the gap between the bench. I think those are the 2 things I would look at for Minnesota to take down Portland.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, they don't have an Anthony Edwards, and Naz Reid, Donte DiVincenzo, Terrence Shannon. I mean, they don't really have the bench depth like Minnesota does too. So I agree. Those are definitely two of the biggest pieces that will win Minnesota the game if they do pull it out. So 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. Evan, I know you're a busy guy. You got a break in between your job to do this podcast, and you're the best. I super appreciate that. Is there anything you want to say before we close it out?
Go Wolves, man. I mean, we're back. It feels like it was a pretty quick turnaround, and I'm ready to get going again. And of course, you guys can always find me T-Wolves Insider on Instagram. That's where most of my content comes from. Shout out to James for having me on again. I'm sure we'll be on again during the season. And really hope you guys tune in. And I think the last one did pretty well, so hopefully you guys check this one out as well.
Evan is a Timberwolves digital creator OG. He built the biggest Instagram platform for the Timberwolves all the way back as early as, I believe, 2016. He's been here for a long time, and he's actually somebody I watched his platform grow, which inspired me to create what was called Wolves News the Future like 7-8 years ago, which, event after event, it's all trickled into this moment, and he's on the show. Evan, you're awesome. We appreciate you. Everybody, if you don't follow him on Instagram, or it's T-Wolves Insider, and he also has a Twitter, Evan Porter NBA. So definitely check him out. He's awesome. He's the best. Thank you all so much for listening. Super excited for the first game of the season against Portland Wednesday night. This is Wilder Wolves Hall of Fame Mode Fandom.